century, there was a group of women called the suffragettes. Suffrage is the right to vote. Back then, women were not allowed to vote and were considered second-class citizens. Some people banded together to change this. Many argued that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution, which states that all persons born in the United States are entitled to the rights of a U.S. citizen, was being broken because women were not allowed to vote. In Section 1 of the 14th Amendment, it in fact states that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States. In 1870, a 15th Amendment was passed that allowed slaves to vote, but still excluded women from the voting process. The first Women's Suffragist Convention was held in Seneca Falls, New York, in 1848. Three of the most influential suffragettes were Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, and Alice Paul. Elizabeth Cady Stanton was born November 12, 1815, to Judge Daniel Cady and Margaret Cady. Her determination to give women rights equal to men started in her childhood. In 1826, when Elizabeth was 11 years old, her older brother, Eleazar, died. Eleazar's death had a terrible effect on Judge Daniel, who would sit for hours mourning his son. Elizabeth decided to do everything she could to comfort her father. She started doing the things a boy would do, hoping one day her father would realize that having a daughter was just as good as having a son. Elizabeth studied hard in school, even winning a prize in her Greek class. She also did activities, such as horseback riding, that were considered boys' activities. After Elizabeth graduated school in 1833, she met Henry Stanton, an anti-slavery activist, and they were married on May 1, 1840. Elizabeth went on to become a strong suffragette and wrote many powerful speeches, some of which were recited by her good friend Susan B. Anthony. Stanton even tried to cast a ballot once in Tenafly, New Jersey. Elizabeth died at age 87 in 1902. She didn't live to see women receive the right to vote.
Susan B. Anthony was born on February 15, 1820, the second of 7 children. Her father, Daniel Anthony, was a Quaker, so that her family had what it needed, but nothing more. Susan's childhood was uneventful, and that continued for a while as she was a school teacher. However, soon, she became one of the most influential suffragist activists of all time. For 45 years, she traveled across America and Europe, giving 75 to 100 speeches every year. She never married. She died on March 13, 1906, at the age of 86.
Alice Paul was born January 11, 1885, to Quaker parents. After a fairly uneventful childhood, Alice attended Swarthmore College and got a Ph.D. from the University of Pennsylvania. After she graduated, Alice dedicated her life to the sole purpose of equal rights for women. She moved on to becoming chair of the National American Women's Suffrage Association. Her leadership was a key point in securing voting rights for women. Alice was arrested 3 times for protesting, and the 3rd time she went on a hunger strike. The prison had to force-feed her and many other women who refused to eat. Alice helped write the 19th Amendment in 1920, which stated everyone had an equal right to vote. On December 10, 1869, the Wyoming Territory passed the first women's suffrage law. In 1893, Colorado became the first state to grant women the right to vote. Gradually, other states began to follow Colorado's lead. But women, especially the newer suffragettes, wanted to be able to vote on a national level. Finally, a 19th Amendment was passed for the Constitution, which granted women the right to vote.
We are persons, native, freeborn citizens, property holders, taxpayers, yet we are denied the exercise of our right to the elective franchise. Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
No woman is even educated to work. Sons are educated while daughters are allowed to grow up to be mere adornments. Susan B. Anthony.
I never doubted that equal rights was in the right direction. Most reforms, most problems are complicated. But to me, there is nothing complicated about ordinary equality. Alice Paul. One common objection to this movement is that if the principles of freedom and equality which we advocate were put into practice, it would destroy all harmony in the domestic circle. Here, let me ask, how many truly harmonious households have we now? The only happy households we now see are those in which husband and wife share equally in counsel and government. Elizabeth Cady Stanton.
I always feel the movement is sort of a mosaic. Each of us puts in one little stone, and then you get a great mosaic at the end. Alice Paul.
If a married woman is injured by accident, in nearly all of the states, it is her husband who must sue, and it is to him that the damages will be awarded. Susan B. Anthony.
Mr. President, how long must women wait to get their liberty? Let us have the rights we deserve. Alice Paul.
Woman must look to man for wisdom, must ever feel it impossible for her to attain wisdom equal to him. Such a doctrine makes my heart sink within me. And did I accept it, I would return to my own father's house and never again raise my voice for women's right to the control of her own person, the ownership of her own earrings, the guardianship of her own children. Susan B. Anthony.
We women of America tell you America is not a democracy. 20 million women are denied the right to vote. Alice Paul.
The effects of the suffragettes finally paid off. On August 18, 1920, the 19th Amendment was ratified. Women could finally vote. This marked the beginning of a golden age for women, who were now finally equal to men. Women could now not only vote, but nothing was stopping them from landing their own jobs and being successful in business.
The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state on account of sex. Congress shall have the power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. The 19th Amendment.
Without important leaders such as Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Susan B. Anthony, and Alice Paul, a woman's life as we know it might have not been achieved. Without these innovators, women might have never been able to have a say in government. Just think what life would have been like without the innovation of women's rights.